Howdy, folks, and welcome to another episode of Stanley and the Sea Can. Alrighty, so this is middle of September 2025. It looks like September 24th. This is printed here. So we've had an interesting last 4 or 5 days here with the gun buyback stuff, and our Minister of Public Safety and all this great stuff was saying, caught on a phone call recorded with an acquaintance talking about firearm bans. So this was kind of interesting. So let's read the whole thing. This is from the CBC. We'll post a link to it. But it says the Minister of Public Safety suggested recently that an acquaintance shouldn't worry about being arrested for refusing to turn in a banned firearm because municipal police have few resources to devote to such matters. And this recording was done on Sunday, it says, so with an unidentified gun owner. So the minister says in the latest phase of federal buyback program will be announced Tuesday, along with a pilot project in Nova Scotia, which did happen. I'll talk about that next. CCFR circulated the recording, which was made without the minister's knowledge. It says, since May 2020, the government has banned approximately 2,500 types of firearms, at least. And the government program says it'll compensate owners fairly for their banned firearms. Government has declared an amnesty period till October 30th, but it's now been moved, I believe, until October 30th of 26. And the outlawed to protect owners from the outlawed guns from being criminally liable. So now we have to say they play down the suggestion that the acquaintance would be taken away in handcuffs for failing to comply. He says that the buyback program is being capped at $742 million. Then on the press release on Tuesday, which would have been probably the 23rd of September, I believe he said that the budget for the $742 million didn't appear in the 2025 budget for the government, but it's being pulled from previous year's budgets that weren't spent. In trying to address the individual frustrations by comments were misguided, he says. And he added, the Canadians have waited long enough for this policy to be implemented, and I fully intend to deliver on this commitment. So kind of what he's saying now and what we saw happen on Tuesday. So I'll kind of fast forward a little bit here. And on Tuesday, around 12:30 Toronto time, 11:30 Eastern, they had a public press conference. And they kind of said, yeah, the buyback is going to begin. And collection compensation for individuals will begin in early 2026. And the pilot program to buy back about 200 units will be done in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. And I think if I remember back, there's a government grant that was issued to Cape Breton, Nova Scotia to pay for police and different services to do this, right? There's going to be some caps on it. So that's the interesting thing is there's caps. So if we go over, say that everyone turns in their firearms and whatnot for whatever pricing, they may have hit a cap. You probably won't get any compensation for it, right? So that is an interesting thing. And the other interesting thing is that's in on this document here. It was the firearms like the crypto, which were made prohibited mid-2025 here. And they were kind of claimed to be an AR-15 variant, which goes way back to the May of 2020 order in council. However, it doesn't appear on any of the price lists. So what is on the price list, which is interesting. So now they've released an individual price list, which I don't see a lot of stuff on the internet about yet. So we're going to have a big scrolling list at the end of this video of all the different prices that they're offering for individuals. So for businesses, the original buyback scheme thing or whatever, they only offered for AR-15s and things from the May 2020 buyback. But what we're seeing now in this price list for individuals is we have stuff, all sorts of stuff, even the things that were taken in December and early 2025, as well as the 2021. So the prices go back and they have stuff from the 2020 order in council and then the December and May. And so what we're seeing is there's a list for businesses and there's a list for individuals, and there's different pricing for both. And the pricing says roughly 15% more for individuals. So if the company has $1,000 into this firearm and they're going to offer us $1,000 for it or whatever, as they don't care what we have into it, they say this is worth $1,000, then as an individual firearms owner, you're going to get 15% more. So you get $1,150 back for this. So that's not the case. The Tavor 7 and X95. This is Tavor X95. It says, actually, I want to show this close up on this. There's a lot of haters in previous videos said this was something else, but it's a Tavor X95. So yeah. So there's a price for this. There's a price for the ARs in there. There's a price for your WKs. WKs are about $2,300, which is probably pretty good. I know we moved hundreds and hundreds of WKs out for less than $2,300. So you should be good in there. And there's some other weird stuff on there, like this little baby belt fed. So some things are easy, right? The WKs, the Tavors and stuff like that. But then you get into some weird stuff like this, where there's like multiple manufacturers that made it. So you have to kind of like read like what it is. And there's kind of no rhyme or reason to the pricing. They say it's based on some sort of knowledge of industry trends. So this one here says Rapid Fire of Troy, Ohio, semi-auto, right? 1919. This is an A4 configuration roughly. And So this has a price of like 6,000 or something like that. So I know that that's going to upset a lot of people because these were trading at, 10,000 or more right up until the ban. So that's kind of what the government's saying is you're kind of screwed. There were some things that said contact the program. Like if you had some sort of weird, obscure firearms that aren't very common in the marketplace, there was just a note in the price list that says contact us to get a price or get us to figure something out or come to an agreement or something. But extreme majority of the firearms in the list, I think it's over 5,000 different variants of firearms that were banned. They all have kind of prices, and some of them are wild on both sides. Like there was one that was a Robinson Arm M96 top loader, like the Bren loader. I think those we used to trade for like 12,000, 15,000, somewhere in that range. And I think they're listed as the buyback as $230. So that's a huge discrepancy one way. And the other side, there was some things that are like the T&W Aero Survival Rifles. I think we used to sell them for about 1,300 or something. And I think the buyback price is 5,000 or something. So there's a lot of, things in there. They're kind of all over the place, especially with the less super common things, right? But yeah, so that's coming up. Sounds like the individual people will be able to do this in early 2026, starting with Cape Breton. Then after whatever happens there, they'll probably do some thinking about it, and then they'll make it available to anyone else that may want to do it. They did say, interestingly enough, that parts and pieces are not available for individual customers or consumers, I guess. So like if you had an AR-15, just the upper only, it's not available for compensation. It's like the complete unit or not at all. So things like the AR-15, you have to look it up. Like this one here is caliber multi. So a lot of AR-15s are multi-cal. So they may not have been listed as a complete firearm, depending on how it was registered and everything else, that you may have to just turn in the lower, or you may have to turn in the upper and the lower together for compensation. However, the upper receiver specifically, this little bit of metal here, is considered a prohibited device, even though it's not serialized and impossible to track. So, yep, same old government waste of money here. Everyone agrees this is not going to do a single thing to promote safety. It's just kind of affecting the registered firearms owners. And there's going to be lots of debate and discussion and frustration over certain prices of things for sure. Oh, yes, they're focusing on it being voluntary. And so in the press release, reporters were questioning to say, like, how is it voluntary if you basically have to do it? And they said, well, your choice, your voluntary choice in it is, I guess you have three choices. You're a criminal if you go to jail. You turn it in to be deactivated, which means weld everything solid, no moving parts, no anything else, no cock and click, all that good stuff. Or you turn it into that program for compensation. So no matter what, all the firearms are being destroyed, technically, right? It's either being deactivated and destroyed or sent to them to be sliced and diced or crushed or whatever they're doing to them to be destroyed. So yeah, we'll fast forward now to the list and check it out. Feel free to, stop, pause the video, share it with anyone else that may be affected by this, and you can start seeing what's coming down the line. And you guys heard it from us first. So thanks so much. And if you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, share the video. Hoping this will be a nice one to share with all your friends that may have affected firearms and any of the bans. So of the 2,500 firearms that were banned, you should know somebody that has something. And there's a whole bunch of hunting firearms in there too. Like the Ruger #1, I was kind of surprised to see that in there. It's the big old falling block rifle, right? For big game. And there were some other shotguns that were listed as like, the Goose Getter and stuff like that. So like pretty defined firearms for the hunting purposes, and you're good to go. And then I guess the other thing is the SKS is still good to go. So they've taken all of this stuff away from us, but yet the SKS is still a go. So we're going to continue doubling down and making more SKS parts and accessories. All right. Thank you.